My six-figure salary was a bottomless well for my husband and his mother, until an $800 spa day for her ignited a financial war. I never imagined it would end with him billing me for emotional labor and caregiving services. The joint bank account wasn't just a financial tool, it was a gaping maw, a black hole that swallowed my salary whole every single month. For 5 years, I'd been shoveling my earnings into it, watching them disappear with a terrifying speed that never seemed to match our lifestyle. I'm an architect. I make good money, a solid 6 figures that should have afforded us a comfortable life, maybe even some nice vacations. My husband, Mark, is a freelance graphic designer, which is a generous term for someone who has a handful of small clients and spends most of his time working on passion projects that never seem to generate any passion from paying customers. But the real drain, the primary beneficiary of my hard work, wasn't Mark. It was his mother, Carol. She moved in with us 3 years ago after her husband passed away. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. But on her feet was a state she seemed determined to avoid. She'd colonized our guest room, turning it into her personal kingdom of daytime television and romance novels. Her only contribution to the household was a constant stream of passive-aggressive sighs and thinly veiled critiques of my cooking, my cleaning, and my apparent inability to make her son truly happy. Every month it was the same story. I'd deposit my paycheck, and within days it would be hemorrhaging money. There were the usual bills, of course, the mortgage on the house. I put the down payment on, the utilities, the car payments. But then there were the other charges. The endless grocery bills padded with Carol's favorite expensive snacks and pre-made meals because she didn't have the energy to cook. The subscriptions to every streaming service known to man so she wouldn't be bored. The online shopping sprees for orthopedic shoes, fancy skin creams, and novelty cat-themed sweaters. Mark never questioned it. "She's grieving," he'd say, even 3 years on. "It's the least we can do." But it wasn't we, it was me. His meager income barely covered his personal phone bill and the gas for his car. I was funding the entire operation. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I was reviewing our online statement, my stomach clenching as I saw the balance dipping dangerously low a full week before my next paycheck. And then I saw it, a charge for $800. The vendor, Serenity Springs Luxury Spa and Resort. I felt the blood drain from my face. We hadn't been to a spa in years. I clicked on the transaction details, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. The charge was for a Duchess for a Day package, a full day of massages, facials, mani-pedis, and a champagne lunch. I called Mark immediately. He was evasive at first, stammering about a charge he'd forgotten to mention. "Who was it for, Mark?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. A long pause. "It was for Mom," he finally mumbled. "Her birthday is next month, and I wanted to do something nice for her. She's been so down." $800. $800 from our joint account, which was 95% my money, for a spa day for his mother, without so much as a conversation with me. I saw red. That was it. That was the last straw on the back of a camel that had already been crushed into the dust. That night, I sat him down. I had a spreadsheet open on my laptop detailing every penny I had earned and every penny that had been spent for the last 6 months. I showed him the breakdown, how my income covered everything, how his contributed almost nothing, and how a significant chunk of it was being funneled directly into his mother's comfort and entertainment. "This is not a partnership, Mark," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. "This is a charity, and I am its sole benefactor. It ends now." I told him my terms. We were separating our finances, effective immediately. We would open a new joint account strictly for shared household bills, mortgage, utilities, property tax. We would each contribute exactly 50% to that account. Everything else, our cars, our phones, our personal spending, our food, would come from our own, separate, personal accounts. What was left of my money was mine. What was left of his was his. He could spend it on passion projects, or he could spend it on his mother, but he wasn't spending another dime of mine. He argued, of course. He called me cruel, unfeeling, materialistic, but when he saw the dead-set look in my eyes, the one that said I was already mentally packing my bags, he folded. He agreed. He was sullen and resentful, but he agreed. I thought the worst was over. I was so naive. A few nights later, we were all sitting at the dinner table. I had made lasagna, using groceries I had bought with my own money from my newly liberated bank account. It was quiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark, looking like he was about to make a grand pronouncement, cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, pushing his plate away, "we need to tell you something. From now on, things are going to be a little different financially. I'm going to be handling my money, and she," he said, gesturing at me with his fork, "is going to be handling hers. We're splitting the main bills, but everything else is separate now." He said it with a hint of pride, as if he'd just negotiated a complex business deal. He was completely oblivious. Carol stopped chewing. She slowly lowered her fork, her eyes darting from Mark to me, a look of profound confusion on her face. The wheels were turning, but they were clearly struggling to find purchase on this new alien concept. She didn't ask what it meant for the cable package or her online shopping. She didn't ask about her allowance. Her gaze drifted past me, towards the pantry and the refrigerator I had just stocked. Her brow furrowed, and with the deadpan sincerity of a child asking a simple, obvious question, she looked directly at her son. "Well, okay," she said, her voice flat. "Son, where's the food?" I set my fork down with a deliberate soft clink against the ceramic plate. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden, suffocating silence. Both of them were staring at me, Mark with a desperate, pleading look, and Carol with a sort of blank entitlement, as if her question was the most logical thing in the world, as if food simply materialized out of thin air, and my role was to be the magician. "The food on your plate, Carol," I said, my voice even and calm, "I bought yesterday. The food in the refrigerator and the pantry I also bought. I bought it with my money from my personal account. It's my food." I then turned my gaze to my husband, the man who had agreed to this new arrangement just days ago. "Your food, and your mother's food, Mark, is something you are now responsible for purchasing with your money." Mark's face went from pale to a blotchy red. "What? That's insane," he sputtered, gesturing wildly at the half-eaten lasagna on his plate. "We can't have your food and my food. We're a family. We live in the same house." "We also lived in the same house when you spent $800 of my money on a spa day without asking," I retorted, my voice dropping an octave. The calmness was gone, replaced by a cold fury I had been suppressing for years. "We didn't have my money and your money then, did we? This is the new reality, Mark, a reality you agreed to. You wanted to handle your own finances. Well, congratulations. This is what it looks like. It looks like creating a budget, planning meals, and providing for your dependents." That's when the tears started. Carol's face crumpled like a used napkin, and a low, theatrical wail escaped her lips. "Oh, Mark," she sobbed, clutching her heart. "I can't believe this. To be treated like a beggar in my own son's home. She's trying to starve me. After everything I've done for you, raising you all on my own after your father. And this is how your wife repays me." The guilt trip was as predictable as it was pathetic. Mark, of course, fell for it instantly. He rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her shaking shoulders. "It's okay, Mom, it's okay," he cooed, glaring at me over her head. "She doesn't mean it. We'll figure it out." But the next morning, it was clear they had figured nothing out. I got up, made myself coffee with the premium beans I loved, and had a bowl of yogurt with fresh berries. Carol emerged from her room, saw my breakfast, and announced to the air, I'm just famished. I could really go for a goat cheese and chive omelet." She then looked pointedly at me and then at the full carton of eggs on the counter. I just smiled faintly, took a sip of my coffee, and said, That sounds lovely. I hope you enjoy it when Mark gets the ingredients for you. Her face tightened into a mask of pure indignation. For 3 days, the house was a war zone of petty skirmishes and passive-aggressive standoffs. I took a Sharpie and wrote my name on my milk, my cheese, my leftovers. It felt childish, but it was necessary. Mark had scrounged up about $50 and bought the bare minimum: bread, peanut butter, cheap instant noodles, and a box of saltine crackers for his mother. Carol acted as if she were a prisoner of war being fed rations. Her sighs grew louder, her complaints more frequent. "My stomach just can't handle all this processed food," she'd moan, loud enough for me to hear from my home office. "I feel so weak. I think my blood pressure is acting up again." Mark became a ghost, slinking around the house with a perpetually worried expression. On the 4th evening, he cornered me in the hallway as I was coming back from the gym. "We need to talk," he whispered, glancing nervously towards his mother's room. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark. The rules are simple." "She's not eating," he hissed, his voice cracking with desperation. "She says the crackers hurt her gums. She needs real food. I don't get paid from my latest project for another 2 weeks. Can't you just help us out? Just until then? I'll pay you back, I swear." I looked at him, at this man I had once loved so fiercely, now reduced to begging for a handout to perpetuate a cycle I was determined to break. "No," I said, the word like a stone. "No more loans, no more IOUs. This is the entire point, Mark. You have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. If you can't afford to feed your mother, then maybe she needs to look into other arrangements. Or maybe you need to look into a job with a steady paycheck." His face twisted in anger. "You're unbelievable," he spat. "You'd really let my mother starve just to prove a point?" He stormed off before I could reply. I felt a pang of something. Not guilt, but a profound sadness for what our marriage had become. But I didn't waver. I couldn't. The next afternoon, I was working when my phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app. It was an alert from the new joint account, the one strictly for the mortgage, utilities, and taxes. We had each deposited our 50% share for the month just last week. The alert was for a new transaction. My blood ran cold as I read it. A charge for $337.82 from Premium Foods Supermarket. I shot up from my desk and stormed into the kitchen, and there they were, Mark and Carol, gleefully unpacking grocery bags across the kitchen island. It was all there: the expensive imported cheeses, the organic vegetables, the pre-made artisanal soups, the gourmet ice cream, even Carol's favorite lavender-scented bath bombs. They looked up at me, not with shame, but with defiance. Mark held up the long, crinkling receipt like a trophy. "Problem solved," he announced, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across his face. "We're a family, so we're using family money. I knew you'd come to your senses eventually." The smug look on his face was like a lit match dropped into a puddle of gasoline. My vision tunneled, the edges blurring into a hazy red. The sound of my own breathing was a roar in my ears. I walked slowly towards the kitchen island, my eyes locked on the receipt still clutched in his hand. Carol was practically purring as she arranged a block of French brie next to a box of water crackers, her earlier performance of a starving waif completely forgotten. "Family money?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Mark, that was the mortgage money. That was the money for the lights, the water, the roof over your head. You took half of the mortgage payment and spent it on brie and bath bombs." He had the audacity to look confused, as if I were speaking a foreign language. "Well, yeah, there was money in the account, and we needed food. It's an essential expense, isn't it? I just used the debit card." "The debit card you were supposed to use only for pre-approved household bills." I snatched the receipt from his hand, my fingers trembling with rage. "We agreed. We explicitly agreed on the rules for this account." Carol chimed in, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Oh dear, don't get so hysterical. It's just a little bit of money. You make plenty more. Mark was just taking care of his poor old mother. Surely you can't fault him for that." I whirled on her. "I can and I do. This isn't about taking care of you, Carol. This is about theft. You are both stealing from me to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford and refuse to work for." "How dare you?" Mark shouted, stepping between us. "Don't you talk to my mother that way. I'm not stealing. I put money in that account too." "You put in your half of the bills," I yelled back, waving the receipt in his face. "And then you took my half out to buy this garbage. Do you have any idea how finances work? The mortgage payment is due in 5 days. What's your plan, Mark? Are you going to pay the bank with crackers and lavender soap?" The reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on him. His smug expression dissolved, replaced by a flicker of panic. I'll get the money," he stammered. "That project, they're paying me soon." "Soon isn't good enough. The bank doesn't accept soon. You have until the end of the day tomorrow to deposit $357.82 back into that account, or I'm transferring all of my remaining funds out and paying my half of the bills directly. You and your mother can figure out the rest on your own." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked back to my office, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. I spent the rest of the day in a seething rage, trying to focus on work but failing miserably. The audacity of it, the sheer, unmitigated gall. He hadn't just broken our agreement, he had spat on it using the very system I created for financial fairness to defraud me. The next day was a tense, silent stalemate. Every time I left my office, I could hear them whispering in the living room. Carol was shooting me looks of pure venom, while Mark just looked pathetic and lost. The deadline came and went. I checked the joint account at 5 p.m. Nothing. The balance was exactly where it had been after his little shopping spree. He hadn't deposited a single cent. With a heart of ice, I followed through on my promise. I logged into my online banking, calculated exactly half of the remaining mortgage payment, the electricity bill, the water, and the internet, and transferred that amount from my personal account directly to the joint one. Then I transferred every remaining penny of my own money from the joint account into my personal account, leaving only his original contribution and the new funds I'd just added. The bills would be paid, but my financial entanglement with him was now surgically severed. I walked out to the living room where they were watching TV. "Mark," I said, not bothering to hide the iciness in my tone, "you failed to replace the money you stole, so I've paid my half of the bills. The rest is up to you." His eyes widened in terror. "What? What does that mean?" "It means there isn't enough in there to cover your half anymore. You're short by $357.82. You have 3 days before the mortgage payment auto-drafts and gets rejected for insufficient funds. I suggest you start calling your clients, or your friends, or maybe sell some of your passion projects. I don't really care how you get it, but you'd better get it." The next 3 days were agonizing. Mark was on the phone constantly, begging, pleading, trying to get an advance from a client who clearly wasn't budging. Carol followed me around the house, alternating between trying to shame me with tearful monologues and trying to intimidate me with dark mutterings about how I'd regret tearing her family apart. I ignored them both. I ate my food, went to work, went to the gym, and lived my life. On the third day, the day the mortgage was due, I came home to find the house eerily quiet. A white envelope was propped up on the kitchen counter with my name written on it in Mark's familiar scrawl. My stomach twisted into a knot. Was it an apology? A suicide note? I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a bill. An itemized invoice, printed from some cheap template on the internet. It was addressed to me, from Mark. The line items read, emotional labor, marital support, creative consultation, and household management. But the most shocking part was the final line item at the bottom, the one that made my blood freeze in my veins. It read, caregiving services for dependent mother, 3 years. Next to it was the total amount due. He was billing me for over $50,000. I stared at the invoice, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. It was so absurd, so utterly detached from reality, that for a moment I couldn't even process the rage. $50,000. He was invoicing me for the privilege of housing and financially supporting his mother for 3 years. He was billing me for his emotional labor in a marriage where I was the sole provider. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was almost impressive. This wasn't a desperate plea, it was a declaration of war. He wasn't just trying to get the mortgage money, he was trying to reframe the entire narrative, painting himself as the uncompensated victim and me as the deadbeat client. My laughter died down, replaced by a chilling clarity. This was it. There was no going back. This piece of paper wasn't just an invoice, it was my exit visa. I carefully folded it and put it in my purse. Then I walked into the living room. Mark was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, trying to project an air of business-like confidence. Carol was beside him, looking smug, as if they had just executed a brilliant legal maneuver. "Did you get my bill?" Mark asked, his voice attempting a nonchalant tone. "I figured since we're treating this marriage like a business, we should make it official. You owe me for my contributions." "I got it," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's a very creative piece of accounting." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "I have a counter offer for you." I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out the large, heavy binder where I kept all our important documents. I opened it on the coffee table in front of them, flipping past the car titles and insurance policies until I found the deed to the house. I tapped the top page. "This house," I began, "was purchased with a down payment of $120,000. That money came from an inheritance my grandmother left me. My name is on that wire transfer. Your name is not. For the past 5 years, the mortgage has been paid from a joint account funded 95% by my salary. I have spreadsheets and bank statements that will prove that to any court in this state without a shadow of a doubt." I then flipped to another section, pulling out the statements from our old joint account. "Furthermore," I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word, "I can also prove that for the last 3 years, thousands of dollars of my income have been spent on non-essential items and services for your mother, a person to whom I have no legal or financial obligation. In fact, one could argue that you have been misappropriating my funds for years." Mark's confident facade began to crumble. Carol's smug smile faltered. "So here is my counteroffer," I said, looking Mark directly in the eye. "You have 2 options. Option A, we go to court. I file for divorce on the grounds of financial malfeasance. I will present this invoice as Exhibit A, proof of your delusional sense of entitlement. My lawyer will tear you apart. I will get this house, I will get my retirement accounts, and you will walk away with your freelance business and $50,000 in imaginary debt. You and your mother will be homeless by the end of the summer." I let that sink in. Carol made a small, strangled sound. "Or," I said, leaning forward, "there's option B. I write you a check right now for $10,000. It's a gift. Severance pay, if you will. In exchange, you sign a quitclaim deed, surrendering any and all claims to this property. You and your mother will pack your bags and be out of this house within 30 days. You will not contact me again except through a lawyer. You take the money, you take your mother, and you disappear from my life forever." The room was dead silent. Mark stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He was a cornered animal, and he knew it. He looked at his mother, whose face had gone a pasty white. He looked at the invoice on the table, then back at me. The $10,000 was a pittance compared to what he thought he deserved, but it was infinitely more than the $0 he would get in court. More importantly, it was cash in hand, a lifeline he desperately needed. It took him a full minute to speak. 30 days, he finally whispered, the fight completely gone from his voice. 30 days, I confirmed. The next month was the most liberating of my life. I hired a lawyer who drew up the paperwork in 2 days. Mark signed everything without a word. I wrote him the check, and the moment it cleared, it was like a spell had been broken. The oppressive atmosphere in the house began to lift as they packed their things. They didn't have much: his graphic design equipment, their clothes, and the mountain of trinkets Carol had accumulated over the years. They filled a small, moving truck. On the final day, I stood by the front door as they made their last trip out. Carol wouldn't even look at me, but Mark stopped in the doorway. "I really did love you, you know," he said, his voice quiet. "I know," I replied, and it was the truth. "But you loved your comfort more." And with that, he walked out of my house and out of my life. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. The house was quiet. The bank account was mine. The food in the fridge was mine. My future was mine. It cost me $10,000 to get rid of my husband and his mother, and it was the single greatest investment I have ever made.